How are you guys doing? Today is Tuesday, April 6th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do a championship profile for Baylor University's men's basketball team after being the only team out of the 68 teams that entered this tournament to have won 6 games and have not lost a single game all the way through. They had an incredible journey to make it here all the way from the beginning. They came in as a 1 seed. They were even the team that I picked in my first bracket to win it all at the very end. And at the end, they took it. They went toe-to-toe with an undefeated team at the very end, and they ended up winning this game very, very comfortably. And with this profile, I just want to provide, of course, the context and, of course, the stats for each of their games along the way, as they had quite the journey to make it here. So, of course, to start it, they didn't even win the Big 12 championship game. They lost in the semifinal. Texas ended up winning the Big 12 championship. But Baylor would still come into this game. They would still come into this bracket with only 2 losses. They came into this bracket with a 22-2 record because now they're 28-2 now that they didn't win. But now that they've won 6 games, to subtract the 6, they came in with 22 wins. And in the very first matchup, they had to face off against 16-seed Hartford as they were placed in the South Division. In their matchup versus Hartford, they would end up beating Hartford they outscored them by 16 points in the first half they ended up outscoring them by 8 points in the second half. The leading scorer for Baylor this game was Maceo Teague, their starting guard, who finished with 22 points and 4 rebounds as he shot 9 for 17 from the field and 4 for 8 from 3. And of course, Jared Butler at 13, Davian Mitchell at 12, and Flagler at 12 off the bench. So with this game, that would be their 23rd win of the season, as of course they would advance to the round of 32. Once they made it to the round of 32, they would have to face off against 9th seed Wisconsin. Wisconsin came into the second round after beating 8th seed North Carolina by 23 points. So, of course, facing off against a very hot Wisconsin team, they would outscore Wisconsin by 13 in the first half, and the second half was actually pretty even. So, of course, Baylor doing what they do naturally, get out early, stop the other teams, and then just have the other teams trying to fight back from behind. That's what they did versus Wisconsin. For Baylor, their leading scorer will come off the bench, as, of course, their guard Matthew Mayer was their leading, or he would come off the bench with 17 points and 6 rebounds alongside 2 steals. He shot 5 for 12 from the field and 5 for 6 from the foul line, as Jared Butler and Davian Mitchell finished with 16 points as well in the starting lineup. With these 2 wins, the Baylor Bears would make it out of the very first weekend, as the number of teams dropped from 68 to 16 in the matter of a week. And once they made it to the Sweet 16, they would have to face off against Villanova, where I think they were probably put in the position where they were probably where they probably faced the most adversity. Going into halftime, they were trailing Villanova 30-23. Villanova held them to 23 in the first half. It looked as though Villanova was going to be the second team to eliminate a number 1 seed in that round. But of course, Baylor would power back. They outscored Villanova 39-21 in the second half. Their leading scorer for the game would be Adam Flagler off the bench, who had 16 points in 24 minutes, who shot 4 for 6 from the field, 2 for 3 from 3, and 6 for 6 from the foul line. And Davian Mitchell would finish with 14 of his own in 36 minutes, as he shot 7 for 13 from the field. Following their 3rd win of the tournament versus the 5-seed Villanova Wildcats, they would have to play in the South Regional Final against 3-seed Arkansas. Of course, 3-seed Arkansas had made it to the Elite 8 after beating 15-seed Oral Roberts, the team that beat 2-seed Iowa and 7-seed Florida. So, of course, Arkansas had quite the journey to get here. In this matchup, this would be the closest game that Baylor would finish in the tournament. They would end up going to halves, and they would end up beating Arkansas 81-72. They won by 9 points. They outscored Arkansas by 8 in the first half, and the second half was pretty even, as of course they made it a point to get at them early in the game. But in the end, for Butler, their leading scorer was their guard, for Baylor, their guard was Maceo Teague, who finished with 22 points and 5 rebounds, as well as 2 blocks in the 37 minutes he played. He shot 8 for 18 from the field, 3 for 7 from 3, and a perfect 3 for 3 from the line. Jared Butler finished with 14 and 5 assists in the starting lineup. Davion Mitchell had 12 points and 6 assists. Then off the bench, Flagler had 10 of his own. It was a complete team performance. And after this game, the Baylor Bears were 4-0 through their first 2 weekends, and they were ready to come into this past weekend ready for the Final Four. Looking how they came into this matchup. Coming into the Final Four, they'd have to face the top team, or they'd have to face the winner of the Midwest region, which was 2-seed Houston. This was the bracket where Illinois was number 1, and Houston had to end up beating 12-seed Oregon State, who made it a long way to get there. Once they made it to this game, Baylor would basically they would win. They would have this game won in the first half. In the first half, they would outscore Houston 45-20. They outscored them by 25. Houston outscored Baylor 39-33 in the second half, but most of it came in garbage time as Baylor was able to hold their first half lead for the second half of the game, which has been their winning strategy the whole time, which they've been doing a very good job at. And then for Baylor in the Final Four, their leading scorer would be their guard, Jared Butler, who finished with 17 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists, as well as 2 steals in the 33 minutes that he played. Their starting guard, Davion Mitchell, would finish with 12 points of his own. Maceo Teague would finish with 11 points and 6 assists. Mitchell had 11 assists to go along with his 12 points. Tachama Tacha would finish with 11 points of his own, and Mayer finished with 12 points off the bench. With this win, Baylor would advance to the national championship, where they faced off against Gonzaga, who were the team that was the number 1 seed that came out of the West region. They came into this game having not lost a game all season from the beginning of the year. Once they made it to this game, it would be Baylor's to win. And in this matchup, they would end up taking it to Gonzaga in the first half. They would end up outscoring Gonzaga 47-37 to take a 10-point lead at halftime, even though it looks as though they should have been up by more. In the second half, they would outscore Gonzaga by another 6 points, so they would win this game 86-70 to win their first ever national championship, giving Gonzaga their first loss in 32 games. This is the first time that Gonzaga has lost a basketball game since February or March 2020, because they didn't have a tournament last season. Looking at how the Bears performed this game, their leading scorer was their guard, Jared Butler, who finished with 22 points, 3 rebounds, and 7 assists in the 31 minutes he played. He shot 6 for 14 from the field, 4 for 9 from 3, and a perfect 6 for 6 from the line. Their guard, Maceo Teague, finished with 19 points of his own. Davion Mitchell had 15 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. And then Adam Flagler would finish with 13 points off the bench as he had in 22 minutes. And with this, Baylor would, of course, they are now the best team in all of basketball. Out of the 68 teams to come into this tournament, they were the only team that didn't lose a game. There were 67 teams that lost, and they're the only team that remains. And with the last college basketball game for the next 6 months, the win goes to Baylor. Congratulations to all the players involved. And of course, this team's going to be broken up. Some of these players are going to go in the draft, as of course they should. But with this said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 8.5 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well. And congratulations to the 2020 Baylor Bears men basketball team. Incredible season of them, and we can't wait to see what they do next year. Once again, thanks for listening to this piece. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you tomorrow once all of today's exhibitions are finished. Peace out.